It's time for me to say that a bunch of NBA players are old for about 7 minutes. First one up is Chris Paul, who was recently acquired by the Houston Rockets to be the guy next to James Harden. But there's a few reasons why I believe that we could see a dip in Chris Paul's numbers this season. One of which is, I just mentioned it, the dude is how old now? He's about to be 32, entering his 12th NBA season or 13th NBA season, something like that. And while he hasn't made a Western Conference Finals, which that's pretty well documented and talked about at this point, he's still been to the playoffs quite a few times. And when we take that on top of his injury history, this previous season he played 60 games, the year before he played 74, got hurt in the playoffs. It's not outside of the realm of possibility that he could suffer some sort of injury during the year again, which is going to leave him out for a stretch. But the other reason is, I still think this is going to be James Harden's team. I think Harden, sure, his usage rate is going to be lower. His duties are just not going to be as high because of Chris Paul. But I do still think that we're going to see Harden as the top dude here, and Chris Paul is going to fit in pretty nicely as the number 2 guy. So I can picture a world where Chris Paul's numbers they decrease a bit. He might miss 12 games or so, add that to his age and being behind James Harden. Yeah, I think Chris Paul could dip down a little bit. Kyle Lowry is 31 years old now at this point, which isn't ridiculously old. I think he'll be 31 some point during the season. But a big reason why I could see his numbers taking a dip, one is because his shooting was ridiculous this previous season. The dude shot over 40% while taking around 7 threes a game, which is not easy to maintain, first and foremost, especially because a lot of them were shooting a 3 right when his guy got caught on a pick and roll. But the other thing is, I think he's just going to play less minutes, because he played 37 minutes a game this previous season for the Raptors, and they just signed him to a contract with him passing the age of 30, and I think they're going to want to preserve Kyle Lowry, and given that he played 60 games this season while playing 37 minutes a night, yeah, I think it's a health risk for the guy. But another reason is, one of the lineups that was so good with Lowry last season was him with the bench, and now you got CJ Miles, there's Pascal Siakam, who is not going to give you the shooting that Patrick Patterson gave you. You still have Nogueira, maybe Jakob Poeltl takes over that role this season, but even with that, I don't see some drastic improvement out of that lineup or that position. There's Jarrell Wright, who has taken the place of Corey Joseph, and Corey Joseph was maybe the best backup point guard in the NBA. So I think the combination of less minutes, as well as a not as good second unit, will lead Kyle Lowry to being a little worse this season. Paul Millsap was signed by the Nuggets to provide them with defense, passing, and they've already got a great passer in Jokic, as well as a power forward who can just do a whole lot of things well. And I think Millsap, first and foremost, I don't know if it's going to be the most perfect fit in the world with Denver from an offensive standpoint. Defensively, as well as passing and all that, I think Millsap will be fine for them. But the reason I say it might not be perfect offensively in terms of scoring is that Millsap, he likes to operate around the elbow, I would say, around 15 feet and in. And to me, Jokic is the kind of center who you just want to give all the room in the world to operate with, because Jokic can kind of do it from everywhere. And that's not to say that I don't think Mike Malone's going to find ways to use Millsap. He definitely will. I think sometimes you could see Jokic and Millsap screening for each other. You could see Millsap starting on the perimeter and then cutting towards the basket. I think they're going to figure it out, but I do think there's a little bit of because Millsap isn't a three-point shooter, there could be times of spacing issues. And then you add to that Millsap's 32 years old, and I could see just a bit of a decline from the dude. Or he could be totally fine, this will be a perfect fit, and he'll be able to maintain himself into his mid-30s. I think there's a possibility for that one as well. I need someone to talk about in this video. Carmelo Anthony, be talking about him and his ESPN Top 100 placement. I disagree with it. I do think he should be higher, I'll say that. But if we look at some trends with Melo's stats, for one, the dude has not been efficient in about 3 years, I would say. He shot basically 43% from the field The past couple, his rebounds were down this previous season, his assists were down, and while his three-point shot was up, I'll give him credit for that one, I do think there is a trend that is potentially developing with Carmelo, as he's now 32 years old. Another one being he just shot less free throws a game. He's also not been good finishing around the basket the past 2 seasons, so I could see Melo just going down a bit more. LaMarcus Aldridge. It seems that everywhere LA is, he starts to get a little salty that he's not the top option. It happened in Portland when Damian Lillard became the fan favorite. It's happening in San Antonio now with Kawhi Leonard. What I would say to LaMarcus is, what the hell did you expect? But also, given that Aldridge is on the San Antonio Spurs, I think there's a chance he could be playing like 28, 29 minutes a game this season as they preserve him the way that they did Tim Duncan. And while Tim Duncan was still able to be a good player, he was still declining in his past few seasons, you know, in pretty much every statistical category. The one thing he had going for him was he was still really good defensively. Aldridge is not the defender that Tim Duncan was. So could I see him averaging 15 points this season? Yeah, sure. And then he gets those minutes made up for him in the playoffs. The only thing I can hope is that his ego is in check and he's okay with the fact that Kawhi Leonard's the top guy, you know? He's the one who's going to be shooting the ball all the time, and hopefully LA can deal with that. I think he should, because I think Aldridge is a fine number 2 dude, especially with that Spurs system. But yeah, we're going to end this video with a Kawhi Leonard clip, even though Kawhi was never really talked about that much.